Good afternoon. My name is Cade Deloach, and today I'm going to be talking to you about school shootings and why teachers should be able to exercise their Second Amendment right in the classroom in order to protect themselves and their innocent students. When I mention the date, April 20th, 1999, what comes to mind? Like many other Americans, you may have been sitting at your house, eyes glued to the television as you watched in horror. On this day in Littleton, Colorado, at Columbine High School, 2 teens went on a shooting rampage that left 17 people dead. Now, in our nation, mass shootings have become an incredible issue. In fact, over just 24 hours on August 3rd and 4th, 2019, 2 mass shootings in Dayton, Ohio and El Paso, Texas, claimed the lives of 32 people. We have seen that these cold-blooded and mentally unstable shooters have begun to target the most vulnerable areas in our nation, such as food courts, grocery stores, and schools. Specifically at schools, where innocent students are charged to learn, there are not near enough law enforcement officers for the ratio of students. One reason that schools are targeted is because they are in a gun-free zone. A gun-free zone is any area in which guns are prohibited for any person other than specific law enforcement agencies. Now, in 1990, the Gun-Free School Zones Act amended the federal criminal code to impose penalties on any student who is found to have brought a firearm on campus or had possession of a firearm on campus. Furthermore, the Gun-Free School Act of 1994 required all states that wish to receive federal funding for their education system to put in place a law that requires local school boards to expel for at least 1 year any student who is found to have possessed a firearm on campus. Now, another major issue when talking about school shootings is the issue of the brain of the shooter. Now, the human brain is one of the most complex things in the world, and it would take multiple years of study and an advanced background in psychology in order to be able to study the brain of a killer. For this reason, I will not be talking about the mental health of the shooters for this presentation. It must be said, however, that many of the refutations to my propositions require the ability to profile the shooter before any event ever happens. These next 2 stories will tell you just how hard it can be to profile a shooter before it happens. On December 14th, 2012, 20-year-old Adam Lanza made entry to Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. He shot through a plate glass window and was immediately met by the school's principal and counselor who he killed. After that, he moved on to 2 first-grade classrooms. In the first classroom, he killed 5 students and 2 teachers. In the second classroom, he killed another 15 students and 2 teachers. Now, in 2013, the state of Connecticut released a report detailing Adam Lanza's mental health history. It was found that he lived with many debilitating mental health issues that did not allow him to live a normal life. However, in interviews with his former caretakers, it was found that there were no warning signs that could predict such a heinous attack. On April 16, 2007, the deadliest school shooting to date took place at Virginia Tech University. Seung Cho, a 20-year-old Korean-American senior at the university, began what would be the shooting spree at 7:30 a.m. when he killed a male and a female in a residence hall. Now, police were originally called to the scene on reports of a domestic dispute, but upon arrival, they found that they had fallen for Cho's bait. At approximately 9:30 a.m., Cho entered a classroom building, locked exits to prevent escape, and began the shooting spree. At the end, 27 students and 5 faculty members had lost their lives, along with Cho himself. In investigations after the attack, it was found that Cho suffered from incredible introversion and many other mental health issues that went unchecked by local law enforcement agencies. More recently, on February 14, 2018, 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz entered his former high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Shortly before the school's dismissal time, Cruz was dropped off at the school by an Uber. He was carrying a rifle case and a backpack. Now, one campus monitor who was walking around campus spotted Cruz and recognized him, but could not remember his name. He did, however, know that Cruz had been expelled from the school and was not supposed to be on campus. Instead of confronting Cruz before Cruz had even loaded his weapon, he radioed another campus monitor who said that he would intercept Cruz. Instead of intercepting Cruz, the second campus monitor turned around and began to walk to the second story of Building 12 where the shooting would unfold. A third campus monitor was alerted when Nicholas Cruz was found by a freshman student loading his weapon in the stairwell of Building 12. He told the student that he should get out of there. Things were about to get messy. Now, the student immediately ran to a nearby football coach who evacuated him from the building, and the football coach ran back in to help. He was too late, however. Cruz initiated his attack, immediately killing 6 on the first floor. When he reached the end of the first floor hallway, he pulled a fire alarm to add to the chaos. When ascending to the second floor, before ascending to the second floor, the students and teachers had heard the fire alarm go off, but they had also heard the shots. They did not leave their protective classrooms, and no one on the second floor was killed, despite shots being fired into 2 classrooms. The students on the third floor were not as lucky. They had not heard the shots go off on the first floor, and when Cruz ascended the stairwell to the third floor, there were at least 20 students still in the hallway. Many of the students tried to enter bathrooms in order to escape from the carnage that was taking place, but the bathrooms had been locked due to newly enacted student vaping policies. Cruz then killed 11 on the third floor before moving to an exterior window to shoot at students escaping down below. However, the glass was engineered to be hurricane resistant and the bullets were stopped, saving the lives of countless students. After realizing that his attack was over, Cruz escaped the building and went to a nearby Subway to order a drink. Now, the vice principal of the school went into the security room and looked at the cameras, but did not realize that there was at least a 30-minute video delay. Now, he was telling police officers where to go in the building, but none of them could find Cruz, even though they could see him on camera. The video delay was not discovered until about 30 minutes later. Now, you may be wondering, where was the school SRO during this time? He was hiding in between buildings 7 and 8 in a defensive position and had told all officers from the Broward County Sheriff's Office to stay back at least 500 feet from the building. Now, it must be said that since the Columbine shooting in 1999, all police agencies are taught to rush to confront the school shooter, as there are higher chances of him being apprehended than waiting for him to exit the building. There were 8 deputies on site when the last shot was fired, and none of them rushed to confront the shooter. Imagine how many students and teachers could have been saved that day if just one of the campus monitors could have been armed. One of the campus monitors could have confronted Cruz with a weapon before he ever had the chance to load his weapon, giving them the advantage. I believe that if the campus monitors would have been allowed to conceal carry a weapon, they would have been more likely to confront Cruz, saving the lives of the 17 students and teachers that died defenseless that day. Now, one of the reasons why Stoneman Douglas was targeted in the first place was because it is a public high school that wishes to receive federal funding. As previously mentioned, the Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1994 made it to where any school that wishes to receive federal funding must be inside of a gun-free zone. Now, with just one of the campus monitors armed, we could have seen a very different statistic that day. Another reason why Stoneman Douglas was targeted is because the shooter knew that as few as one person would be armed on campus. Now, one of the main issues with SROs is a simple ratio. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School had 3,300 students with just one SRO to protect them. We can see this in our own city. Airline High School has approximately 1,864 students with 3 SROs to protect them, equating to an officer every 621 students. Benton High School is not much different. They have 1,024 students with 3 SROs, which equates to an SRO every 343 students. Now, we have seen that this ratio is not going to work to protect the lives of our students. Imagine if our final local example, our home, Providence Classical Academy, has approximately 491 students with just 1 SRO. Now, imagine a scenario where the SRO is patrolling in A wing and then a life-threatening situation poses itself in E wing. How many students and teachers could be killed before the SRO even has time to make it down to the scene? Now, imagine the same situation if just 1 teacher was armed in every wing of the school. We could turn a chaotic situation into a much more manageable scene. Now, it must also be said that many of these campuses feature buildings with thousands of square feet spread over a lot of space with multiple buildings. As we said in the Parkland story, crews shot in building 12, and there was only 1 SRO. Some people may disagree with the change that I have proposed. One of the reasons that they may disagree is for the existing safety of the SROs with more firearms on campus. Now, it must be said that not all teachers would be required to carry a firearm. I'm merely arguing that they are given the option to conceal carry in order to protect themselves. Now, for the safety of the existing SROs, each teacher that decides to conceal carry on campus would have to undergo the same firearms training course that would be put on by the same agency that employs the SROs and stations them on campus. Additionally, the teacher would have to carry a concealed carry permit at all times and have recurrent training every time that their concealed carry permit expires. Now, another reason that people may disagree with what I've proposed is that a student could gain access to the firearm. In actuality, the firearm would be locked away in the classroom or on the teacher's person at all times. Another reason that people may disagree with what I've proposed is because they think that if we take the guns away, then it will take away the school shootings. In actuality, this begins to restrict our Second Amendment constitutional right, which gives us the right to bear arms. And it also takes away the guns from the good person who wants to protect his family, property, and other innocent civilians and stop a shooter like Nicholas Cruz. Now, it must also be said that these gun control policies do not work in the way that they are intended to. The United States ranks 3rd from the top in murders in the world, and if you take away Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, and Washington, D.C., we rank 4th from the bottom. Now, these cities also have the most restrictive gun control laws in the nation. Now, another reason that people may disagree with what I've said is because they believe that we should profile a school shooter. We have seen this with advocacy groups such as the Sandy Hook Promise, who wish to put out PSAs and videos that say, look for the warning signs of a school shooter. However, it must be said that Nicholas Cruz was reported to police 23 times for behavior that was seen as a danger to the public before his shooting ever took place. Cell phone videos were also found after where Cruz planned his shooting and said that he was going to be the next school shooter of 2018 and bragged about how many people he was going to kill. Now, we can see that we will always be one step behind. No matter how much study we put into trying to profile shooters, we will never be able to comprehend the brain enough to profile a shooter before they are able to carry out such a heinous attack. In conclusion, we have seen that in order to protect the lives of our students, we must give teachers the opportunity to conceal carry in the classroom. This will help turn an unmanageable scene into a much more controllable scene, and the teacher could assist the SRO in apprehending the suspect after a shooting were to take place. Now, we have also seen that the gun control laws put in some cities in our nation do not work. In the same way that laws against drugs do not prevent people from doing drugs, laws against guns on school grounds will not stop mass shooters from coming on campus and starting a shooting spree. I believe that teachers should be able to exercise their Second Amendment right in the classroom in order to protect themselves and their innocent students. Thank you. I would now like to open the floor to any questions that you may have. Mr. Clay.
Yeah, Cade, I appreciate your topic. I appreciate your delivery and discussion of it. Your examples are sobering, things that we need to take into consideration here. I was curious about a couple of things. First, when people on the same side accidentally shoot each other, that's sometimes called friendly fire. Did you see any statistics, and I know you hit on this sort of in a bit, but did you see any statistics, any data to show that friendly fire incidents are more common among civilians, trained civilians, than they are in law enforcement, for instance?
You know, my research didn't exactly lead me in that direction, but I can say that when law enforcement officers are on school property, there have been incidents where a firearm was discharged on accident, or an officer was wrestled by a student in order to gain access to the firearm. So I don't believe that there would be any difference between a teacher carrying a concealed firearm and a law enforcement officer carrying a firearm. And I also believe that it puts a really big target on the law enforcement officer's back when they're the sole armed person on campus. I believe that if someone was going to, commit one of these heinous acts, then they would probably target them first, because they know if they can take them out, then they can get to the rest of the student population.
One other thing that you had mentioned that, I believe since Sandy Hook, that the policy almost universally is that the officer is supposed to go and actively engage the shooter.
Yes, since Columbine, officers have been trained to react to a school shooting by charging towards the school shooter instead of holding out a defensive position. Just because there are so many people in the building, it can become a mass shooting so quick. In order to save lives, you have to be able to confront that shooter before, every bullet could be a life. So you have to be able to confront that shooter.
I noticed that the Broward County Deputy Scott Peterson, in the Parkland shooting incident, he still maintains that he was following the policy and training that he had received over 30 years.
So Sheriff Israel of Broward County told, in investigations after the shooting, told the investigators that he had actually told his officers to defensively react to a school shooting scenario, which would then overwrite that previous order. And no one really knows why he told them that. I guess to save the lives of his officers. He didn't want it to be on him if an officer were to die, which is understandable. But 17 kids and teachers died that day instead of one officer out of the 8 that were there rushing in to confront the shooter.
And I noticed the first people to actually enter the building, first law enforcement, were the Coral Springs PD guys.
Yes, one of the things that I mentioned in my paper was that Broward County has a disjointed 911 system, and since Scott Peterson never called in a code red to the sheriff's office, the first 911 calls came from the cell phones of students and teachers, which meant that they were routed to the Coral Springs Police Department, which doesn't have jurisdiction over the Parkland area. So he had to transfer the calls to the Broward County Sheriff's Office after the fact, costing time and the lives of more students because there weren't officers on campus.
And yet the Coral Springs guys were the first law enforcement.
4 Coral Springs officers were the first people to enter the building, and Scott Peterson left his hiding spot almost 40 minutes after the last shot was fired.
So the bottom line is it's more initiative than anything else.
Yes. I appreciate your question. Ms. Bo?
So with the Parkland incident and the topic that has come up about SRO training, did your research give you any detail into that training?
I will say that like I previously said, after Columbine, all officers are told to rush the school shooter, like I was telling Mr. Clay, in order to reduce the amount of lives that are lost and the amount of bloodshed before an officer ever reaches the shooter. In diving into the specific training of officers, my research didn't exactly lead me in that direction, but I do know that more and more law enforcement agencies have begun to do school shooting or mass shooting specific training for firearms that allow them to prepare for the situations before they are in them. For example, at Parkland, it's in the news this week actually, the head deputy that was on the scene just got his job back with full back pay all the way back to February 14th, 2018. And on that day, it was found that he was in a state, obviously of shock. Any of us would have been in shock, but he was in a state where he was not fit to give orders to the officers below him. So I do think that more training should be put into place for specific scenarios like this, but as far as my research leading me in that direction, I didn't really go in that direction too much. Thank you.
But did you state that you're an advocate for teachers that are concealed carrying to have that training?
Yes, they would be trained by the same law enforcement agencies that employ the SROs and station them on campus. For example, we would be the Bossier Parish Sheriff's Office. They have numerous firearms safety courses for concealed carry permit holders, but also those school shooting specific scenarios, the teachers would go through those as well.
Okay. And just as a quick second question, if I can ask, with the mental health issue, I know you didn't dig into that, but there's a huge issue that we have in our society with dealing with mental health issues, obviously, with these shooters. So as a teacher, as an educator in a classroom, I think any teacher would say the safety of his or her students is priority.
Yes, ma'am.
If we have fire drills, we have tornado drills, those are all things I think that instinctively we have been trained to live through and how to deal with it. Have you given any thought, or has your research pointed to, besides concealed carry, how we can better train teachers to prepare for these type of scenarios?
Well, I believe the title of my paper is Why Hiding in Hard Corners is Not Enough. And a hard corner is an area in the classroom where teachers and students can hide outside of the line of sight of the shooter through the window. So I wouldn't say that those are enough, because you can shoot through a window. The shooter will find a way. He is dead set on achieving the most harm that he can. In fact, one of the things that I talked about in my paper was what's called the media contagion effect, which is where when the news agencies begin to spread the name and the number of deaths of these school shootings, future school shooters began to, one, plot it in their head, but two, begin to, I want to do better than that. I want to kill more people. And it really just, the amount of media that it receives has just blown up the amount of school shootings that we see. 2 weeks after Parkland, there were 638 copycat threats nationwide, which most of them were hoaxes, but we can still see, like, any community that was in, it would still have an incredible, it would be incredibly hard to deal with in that community. So the mental health of the shooter is important, but like I said in my presentation, it's just too complex to really be able to profile that school shooter before they carry out that act. So that's why I didn't dive into it. Thank you.
Excellent job.
Any other questions? Mr. Bates?
You did a great job. I'd be curious just to learn, why do you think the rapid increase of school shootings?
Why do I think there has been a rapid increase of school shootings? So in between Columbine and Sandy Hook, we didn't see a ton of school shootings. Columbine was kind of an outlier in 1999, and then when Virginia Tech came along in 2007, it was still a little bit of a, terrible accident that had happened, and no one really saw it coming. But once we got to Sandy Hook, we started to see more and more frequency in that. And I think that the more and more that these advocacy groups are putting out, we need to profile the school shooters, we need to take away the guns from the good civilians, we need to put up gun-free zones so they will turn away at the door, which isn't going to happen. I think that has just given more incentive for school shooters to go to these places where everyone is vulnerable, because there aren't enough officers or law enforcement to protect them.
Appreciate that. So I'm curious if you think gun-free zones are good ideas.
I personally,
I'm just kidding about that. I am curious why you think that they're proposed so frequently. I mean, why do they keep doing them when, as you said, 98% of mass shootings happen in those?
you know, like I mentioned in my presentation, there are laws against drugs. They don't stop people from doing drugs. You know, we still have a massive, you know, opioid pandemic in our world right now, and you know, these laws against them aren't stopping people from doing drugs. So these laws, or a simple sign posted outside of a school, isn't going to stop someone who wishes to, you know, kill as many people as they can because they feel that they aren't receiving what they want in their life. I don't think that's going to turn anyone around. I don't know why our nation has decided to go in this way, where it's more of a put up a sign and kind of push it away, push it under the rug so we don't have to think about it. But then these things happen, and then you have to think about it. And I think that, as Ms. Bo is saying, like we do tornado drills, we do fire drills. I really think we should do more lockdown drills. You never know when the day's going to come where someone just barges in and decides to start shooting up the school. So I appreciate your question. I really believe that our nation isn't going in the right way by putting these gun-free zones everywhere. Because like I said, it's not just schools, it's also hospitals, malls. The El Paso shooting was a Walmart, you know, and we've seen multiple Walmart shootings in 2019. So I just don't think that these gun-free zones are going to protect people like they think they are. Any more questions?
I think you've grown up in my house, so you understand there is no threat or no peace without the threat of war. And the people that are doing this are doing it for notoriety. They're doing it from a narcissistic standpoint, or someone else has abused them, right? So they want power. So they're going to go where they can have power, and the gun-free zones empower them, right? So if I know here, and the policy used to be here, that several unknown people did carry. And that the fact that they're unknown gives a fear to someone that comes in. They don't know who's armed, right? So what do you think, because there are reasons here that it's not that way anymore, have nothing to do with the fact that the administration doesn't think it should be that way. It's an insurance issue. So that being the case, when it's kind of like imposed from the side, what do you think should happen? What do you think, because you're saying that the nation's policy, the politics, is leading more towards appeasement than détente, right? I want people armed, the good guys too, right? So what do you think even this administration can do?
Well, thank you for that question. The insurance issue, I believe, it's not right from the insurance agency's standpoint, because yes, while there will be more firearms on campus, if a school shooting were to happen, more lives are going to be saved with more guns in the building. It's not going to be, we have one SRO, and it's almost like the argument of collateral damage. You know, the insurance company is like, well, we lost the lives of those students and teachers, but at the end of the day, our SRO wasn't harmed, or a gun didn't accidentally go off, or a teacher didn't, pull out a firearm on a bad day or something like that. So I really believe that the insurance agency has a twisted belief on it, because they're trying to argue that with less guns on campus, this outlier won't happen. But in reality, we've seen that Adam Lanza wasn't supposed to be a school shooter. None of his caretakers thought he was a school shooter. And Soon Cho, none of his peers thought he was a school shooter until he did it. And so I really think that what needs to be put into place is teachers being able to conceal carry, purely because they're there just in case. And maybe there are more firearms on campus in day-to-day life, but the teacher will have registered with the SRO to prevent friendly fire incidents, and none of the students will know who the teachers are unless they have to brandish their firearm in that situation. So I really believe that that is more insurance than any insurance agency could ever give.
And who knows the mental health of the students better than the teachers? Small government.
Exactly. Jenny.
I have worked for a private school, and as a basketball coach, I've seen how few actual policies are in place for any kind of active shooter. There's no, that I'm aware of, no drills. There's definitely no conversations with coaching staff, I'll say that, about what we would do if there was an active shooter in the building during a practice or a game. Do you feel like the focus is where it should be on concealed carry for teachers, or that there's a lack of focus on security measures that need to be provided for schools? How did an active shooter get in a full gun to assemble into a stairwell? How did he make it that far with that? Why were there not procedures in place? How many school shootings have to happen to have measures taken that there are more metal detectors, more scanners to actually have entrance into a school building? Do you feel like that should be the priority and the concealed carry should be the secondary to that? Or that concealed carry needs to happen first, and that's where we need to, like, since it is kind of the whole thing is on guns or no guns?
I appreciate that question, and I really believe that schools should take more time to have drills, have lockdown drills, and discuss with faculty what to do. Because like we've said in these other questions, you don't know when it's going to happen. And if, as we've seen in this time of quarantine, there haven't been any school shootings because no one's been at school. I believe that that's really a sign that the gun-free zones are what attracts the shooters. You know, they haven't had any vulnerable places to go shoot because they've all been closed. And so I really appreciate your question and asking that the concealed carry should come, but I do agree that it should come along with other safety procedures, because at the end of the day, a teacher is not going to be forced to conceal carry a weapon. That would be unlawful in many other ways. But a teacher should have the opportunity to, if they so desire, in order to protect their innocent students from these people who can just show up one day and take the lives of 17 people.
You said that the students would not know who was authorized to conceal carry, but that, of course, I guess the rest of the faculty and staff would, and they would be registered. What about parents who may not want they may oppose this and not want that? Would they be notified that it's this teacher or that teacher, or just a certain number of teachers, or how would that work?
I appreciate your question. I believe that, as PCA used to do, we had a sign on the door that said, certain teachers are allowed to conceal carry on the premises. I don't think that it would be, one, fair for the teacher's privacy, or two, safe to put out the names of every teacher on campus who's armed. That kind of puts us back at square one, where the shooter would know everyone who's armed on campus and be able to target them first. So I do believe that a sign should go up like we used to have at PCA that says certain teachers are armed on campus and they have that right. But I don't think that we should go out and say these specific teachers are armed just so you know your kid's safe. Because I really think that as long as that sign's on the door, one, it's going to deter more school shooters than anything. But also, I feel like there's a sense of safety when you're a parent, that maybe you don't want your kids around firearms. But if the kid doesn't know that the firearm's there, then I think that it's a much greater risk to not have the firearm on campus than to say, oh, I don't want firearms around my children, when they don't even know it's there. So I appreciate that question, and I do believe that we would have a sign up that would say, certain teachers are armed on campus, but we aren't going to list it. Any more questions? Well, I appreciate y'all's attention, and if you have any further questions after, you can come see me. Thank you for your attention.